They called her a failure, a fraud, publicly shamed, her name a punchline across every screen. But what if the loudest voices, the most confident condemnations, were precisely what she needed? What if true failure isn't falling, but never daring to rise again? Join us as we peel back the layers of public scorn to reveal the hidden strength forged in the crucible of absolute defeat. Ilara Vance, once hailed as a prodigy, now felt the collective sneer of a million faces. The headlines screamed, "Vance's folly. Ambition implodes." Her groundbreaking algorithm, meant to revolutionize data privacy, had backfired spectacularly, exposing vulnerabilities she swore didn't exist. Each news segment, each viral meme, chipped away at her carefully constructed identity. The biting comments on social media, the thinly veiled pity from the outright laughter from competitors, it all echoed in her hollow apartment, amplifying the silence. Did they not see the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the sheer, unyielding belief? Their judgment was swift, brutal, and absolute. But beneath the stinging tears, a flicker ignited, a cold, steady ember. They called it failure. She called it a lesson. And lessons, Ilara knew, were merely the beginning of true mastery. The stinging tears eventually dried, leaving behind a cold, crystalline resolve. Ilara Vance looked at the wreckage of her life, not with despair, but with a chilling clarity. They thought they had broken her, but they had only stripped away the layers of expectation and ego, revealing something far more resilient beneath. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about understanding, about rebuilding, and about a silent promise whispered to the empty walls of her apartment, a promise to herself that this humiliation would be the forge, not the tomb. She began by meticulously dissecting every moment of her algorithm's collapse. Not just the code, but the data, the network logs, the external pressures. She spent days sifting through public records, academic papers, and obscure forums, seeking patterns, anomalies, anything that the official inquiries had overlooked or deliberately ignored. It became clear very quickly that the public narrative was incomplete, deliberately so, but the full truth remained elusive. Like smoke through her fingers, she sensed a hidden hand, a ghost in the machine that manipulated not just her work, but the perception of it, something far more sinister than The vulnerabilities her algorithm exposed were far more complex and dangerous than anyone understood, hinting at a deliberate exploitation rather than a mere design flaw. Her first real step was a stark departure from her old life. The soft, sedentary habits of a prodigy coder were shed like dead skin. Mornings began before dawn, not with lines of code, but with miles of asphalt under her pounding feet, pushing her body until exhaustion was a welcome numb. She enrolled in a local, unassuming martial arts choosing a discipline focused on precision and self-control, not flashy moves. The physical pain was a necessary distraction, a grounding force, teaching her discipline that transcended the digital realm. She needed a new kind of strength, one not easily undermined by public opinion. Ilara's grueling physical training was not just for discipline. It was a desperate attempt to fortify a mind that felt utterly exposed against an enemy she still couldn't name. Evenings, she returned to her screens, but not too familiar interfaces. She delved into fields completely alien to her academic background: advanced cryptography, reverse engineering, digital forensics, even the psychology of disinformation campaigns. Her old contacts were useless, likely compromised, so she sought knowledge in the deepest corners of the internet, in private forums and encrypted channels. Adopting multiple, ever-changing digital personas, she learned to speak in code. Not programming language, but the nuanced dialect of the shadows. The sheer volume of new information was overwhelming, but each piece was a potential weapon, a new lens through which to view her downfall. Her clandestine education brought her into contact with individuals operating far outside conventional legality, raising questions about the moral compromises she would inevitably face. The old Ilara Vance had to die. Her social media footprints, academic publications, even obscure forum posts, all systematically erased. Not just deleted, but overwritten, scrubbed from cached servers and archived databases with a meticulousness born of desperation. She built new digital identities, layers upon layers, each with a carefully constructed backstory, distinct digital fingerprints, and no traceable link back to the disgraced prodigy. It was a painstaking, paranoia-fueled process, a constant battle against the indelible nature of the internet. This wasn't just about privacy. It was about survival, about becoming invisible in a world that craved visibility. Her efforts to erase her past were so thorough that even she sometimes lost track of her own digital constructs, blurring the lines of her true identity. She couldn't do it alone, but traditional mentorship was out of the question. Instead, she found unlikely teachers, an anonymous voice in an encrypted chat, an eccentric former government operative who communicated only through cryptic riddles left in dead drops, a disgraced data journalist living off-grid. Each offered a piece of the puzzle, a tool, a perspective she lacked. These mentors were not seeking payment in currency, but in an unspoken understanding, a shared distrust of systems, a quiet rebellion. They tested her, pushed her, and sometimes she suspected, manipulated her. But the knowledge they imparted was invaluable, opening her eyes to the true architecture of power. Ilara's new mentors were not merely altruistic. Their aid came with hidden agendas, suggesting she was becoming a pawn in a game far larger than her own vindication. Her initial attempts to apply her new skills were clumsy, fraught with near misses and frustrating failures. She tried to penetrate a low-level corporate network, a minor test, and found herself blocked by defenses she hadn't anticipated, nearly tripping alarms. There were moments of doubt, flashes of her old humiliation, whispering that she was still the failure they proclaimed. But the relentless training, both physical and mental, had forged a new kind of resilience. Each setback wasn't an end, but a data point, a bug to be debugged, a lesson to be learned. She was no longer seeking perfection. She was seeking mastery, one painful step at a time. Ilara's early failures revealed that her opponents possessed a level of technological sophistication far beyond what she initially estimated, making her task exponentially harder. The burning desire to prove her worth wasn't a fleeting emotion. It was a constant, searing flame. It wasn't about fame anymore or accolades. It was about rectifying a colossal wrong, not just to herself, but to the millions whose trust had been eroded by the very vulnerabilities her algorithm was meant to protect. She understood now that her failure was a symptom of a much deeper, systemic corruption, a deliberate subversion of digital safety. Her personal humiliation had been a convenient smokescreen, drawing attention away from the true architects of the data breach. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Ilara realized her public downfall was a carefully orchestrated distraction, designed to conceal the true perpetrators and beneficiaries of the widespread data exposure. Her efforts became more surgical, more focused, no longer blindly exploring. She began connecting the dots, seeing patterns in seemingly unrelated events. The public shaming of other innovators, the sudden collapse of nascent privacy-focused startups, the subtle shifts in online discourse, it all painted a chilling picture. She started to build a comprehensive map of the digital landscape, identifying key players, tracking their movements, anticipating their next moves. Her apartment, once a symbol of her defeat, became a war room bathed in the glow of multiple monitors, filled with the hum of servers. She was a ghost in the machine, and she was learning to haunt. Ilara's research began to unveil a vast, interconnected web of technological and political influence, far more insidious than a simple corporate rivalry. The whispers of a larger game, once faint, now echoed loudly in her mind. Her initial algorithm, meant to be a shield, had inadvertently become a key, unlocking a Pandora's box of digital vulnerabilities that powerful entities were only too eager to exploit. Her humiliation was merely a distraction, a perfectly executed public spectacle to divert attention from the real crime. She wasn't just fighting for her reputation. She was fighting to expose a truth that certain powers wanted buried forever. The path she embarked on was no longer about personal vindication. It was about exposing an insidious, pervasive threat to the very fabric of digital trust. She had become a reluctant guardian, unknowingly thrust into a silent war. Ilara's journey was transforming from one of personal redemption into a desperate, solitary war against a global threat, with her first overt move poised to ignite a dangerous counterresponse. Ilara vanished not just from public view, but from the digital radar of her tormentor, a phantom limb removed from the internet's public body. Her exile was a meticulously crafted illusion, a smokescreen behind which a new, formidable entity was born. The small apartment, once a vibrant war room, became a silent ghost ship, charting unknown digital waters, its hum a steady thrum of defiance. She didn't just recompile her algorithm, she deconstructed the very fabric of the internet, searching for the hidden fault lines. What she found wasn't merely corporate espionage. It was a systemic vulnerability woven into the global infrastructure, a backdoor left intentionally ajar for a select few, an architectural flaw no one seemed to question. Every line of code, every encrypted message became a brick in her new, unseen foundation. Her old detractors, blinded by their perceived victory, never imagined their defeated opponent was now meticulously mapping their entire digital ecosystem from its weakest links to its most fortified bastion. She used their own sophisticated tools against them, not for overt destruction, but for silent, surgical extraction of information, a silent siphon in the dead of night. The public saw a disgraced tech genius, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. But in the shadows, Elara was quietly recruiting. She didn't offer money, but something far more potent, shared grievances and a burning thirst for a truth that had been systematically buried. The first recruit wasn't a hacker from the dark web, but a former lead data analyst from one of the very corporations that had slandered her. A man with his own deeply buried secrets and a grudge that burned hotter and deeper than Elara's initial humiliation. Their network grew quietly, a whisper in the digital void, connecting scattered individuals who had lost everything: their reputations, their livelihoods, even their families to the same shadowy cabal she was now tracking. These scattered souls, operating from different continents and time zones, didn't know each other's true identities, communicating only through Elara's labyrinthine secured channels, completely unaware of the full, terrifying scope of the web she was weaving around them. Years blurred into a relentless cycle of coding, forensic analysis, and clandestine, anonymous meetings in forgotten corners of the net. Her operations weren't about grand, explosive gestures. They were about surgical strikes, acquiring vital assets, disrupting minor, seemingly unrelated operations, all beneath the notice of the main players. The setbacks she faced, the moments of near discovery or compromised data, were not failures but invaluable data points, showing her precisely where the cracks were, where the true, consolidated power lay. She discovered how deeply intertwined political power, global financial institutions, and technological monopolies truly were, forming a single, hydra-headed beast. The corporate rivalry that had initially framed her downfall, the one that had consumed headlines, was revealed to be merely a proxy war, a brilliant public diversion for something far larger and more sinister: the silent assimilation of national security infrastructure by private interests. Her burgeoning empire wasn't built on conventional wealth or public recognition, but on an unparalleled repository of information and the unwavering loyalty of the disenfranchised, those who had nothing left to lose but their chains. She orchestrated subtle market manipulations, siphoning off just enough to fund her growing infrastructure without triggering any major financial alarms or attracting the attention of regulatory bodies. These minor financial tremors, appearing as random market fluctuations to the uninitiated, were actually the deliberate creation of a new, untraceable economic stream, flowing directly into her hidden coffer, a ghost economy funding a ghost war. She was transforming their own centralized power against them, decentralizing information, and distributing influence in ways they couldn't possibly track. Elara, once a brilliant but naive scientist, had evolved into a cold, calculating strategist, a master of deception, her touch as precise as a surgeon's scalpel, her mind a fortress of logic. The quiet hum of her servers, once merely background noise, became the rhythmic heartbeat of a new kind of organization, a phantom limb on the body of global power, felt but never seen. Her true identity remained perfectly buried, her public persona a forgotten, discredited footnote, which was precisely her most potent, untouchable weapon. The deliberate absence of a physical presence from the public eye allowed her to exist everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. A digital wraith. She learned to predict their moves not just by understanding their advanced technology, but by meticulously unearthing their psychology, understanding the core fears, the insatiable greed, and the chilling ambitions that drove the architects of this digital tyranny. Every successful evasion, every minor victory, fueled a quiet, steel-edged confidence, but also deepened her understanding of the monumental, terrifying task ahead. The global threat she now faced wasn't a singular entity, but a vast, interconnected network. A hydra-headed beast, each head seemingly independent yet connected by an unseen, clandestine nodal network sharing data and resources. She discovered that her initial algorithm, the one meant to be a shield, had not only unlocked profound vulnerabilities in their system, but had also inadvertently activated a dormant countermeasure, a digital immune system designed to neutralize any profound anomaly, including her own growing network. This countermeasure, once a theoretical threat, was now slowly, inexorably closing in, its probes growing stronger. The arduous years of relentless work had forged Alara into something formidable, something they had never accounted for. A ghost with an increasingly visible army, ready to strike from the shadows. The silence of her operations, her greatest asset, was about to break. The subtle shifts in the digital landscape, once dismissed as background noise or isolated incidents, were now finally being noticed by the very powers she sought to expose. They were beginning to feel the phantom pains of her unseen strikes, the inexplicable loss of critical data, the subtly compromised communication channels, the growing, unsettling dissent within their own rigidly controlled ranks. The lead architect of her public humiliation, a man named Sterling Vance, was not just a pawn in this grand game, but a key player, his own meteoric career trajectory inextricably linked to the continued success and secrecy of this global network. He was now dedicating all his considerable resources to finding the Phantom, the anomaly that was disrupting his perfectly ordered world. Alara knew, with a chilling certainty, that the game was entering its next, far more dangerous phase, one where anonymity would no longer suffice as her primary defense. Her true identity remained a ghost story in the tech world, a cautionary tale whispered late at night, while the real Alara, the strategist forged in fire, meticulously prepared for a war she could no longer fight from the shadows alone. The counter-response, once a distant echo, was now a tangible, active threat, a relentless series of sophisticated probes hitting her hidden servers with increasing frequency and devastating precision, each one leaving a small, indelible mark on her meticulously crafted digital fortress, testing its very limits. From a new vantage, high above the city, Alara watched them. Not literally, of course. Her surveillance was far more pervasive, a digital tapestry woven with threads of their own making. Their once impenetrable systems now hummed with her silent presence, an irony not lost on her. Her name, a whisper in the dark corners of the net, had become a legend, a phantom that haunted their sleep. The world believed Alara was gone, a cautionary tale, but she merely reshaped her stage. The wealth amassed from her ventures, once a quiet hum in the background, now pulsed with the undeniable power of a silent empire, its reach extending into every sector her old tormentors inhabited. She observed the cracks in Sterling Vance's meticulously constructed facade, the exhaustion etched around his eyes as he chased ghosts. He was closer than he knew to the truth, yet still so far from grasping the full extent of her resurgence. Her past critics, a council of the self, remained oblivious, consumed by the relentless pursuit of the very disruption she orchestrated. They thought they were hunting an anomaly. She was the architect of their new reality, and the game was about to shift dramatically. Vance's relentless probes against her servers, once a genuine threat, were now mere ripples against a fortified digital ocean she had meticulously constructed. His efforts, though substantial, were revealing more about his own vulnerabilities than hers. He was searching for a shadow, unaware that the shadow itself was preparing to cast its own light. The final phase, the one she had meticulously planned for years, was finally at hand, and it would not be fought in the shadows. This time, the stage would be well lit, and the audience captive. The invitation, when it finally arrived, was not digital. It landed on their desks, a physical anomaly in a world obsessed with ephemeral data streams. Each envelope, crafted from an obscure, almost iridescent paper, bore no return address, no sender ID, only their names meticulously etched in a script reminiscent of forgotten ciphers. Vance received his during a late-night debugging session, the thick cardstock a stark contrast to the blinking blue light of his monitors. He frowned, his fingers tracing the raised lettering. A curious sense of unease, a cold premonition, snaked through him. This wasn't some generic corporate junk mail. It felt deliberate, almost personal. There was a specific weight to it, a subtle hum of forgotten memories. Inside, a single, elegantly designed card. No logos, no branding, just an enigmatic message. The architect requests your presence, an unveiling of the future. Date, specific date. Time, specific time. Location, to be revealed. Your past insights are invaluable. Beneath the text, a unique, almost imperceptible symbol, a stylized helix, was barely visible. Vance froze. The helix, he hadn't seen that symbol since Since Elara, it was her personal identifier in the closed circles of the underground tech world, before her public downfall, his heart began to pound with a mixture of dread and a thrill he hadn't felt in years. Could it be the phantom he'd been chasing, the disruption tearing at his networks, the ghost of his greatest professional adversary? Suddenly materializing, not in code, but in a physical summons, the invitation was a gauntlet thrown, an audacious challenge from someone who clearly felt untouchable. He dismissed it, then picked it up again, his mind racing. It was too elaborate for a simple prank, too specific to be random. Other critics, spread across different continents, experienced similar jolts of recognition and dread. Senatore Iris Thorne, a vocal proponent of Vance's public condemnation of Elara, found his invitation nestled amongst official documents. The senator, a man of rigid protocols, scoffed at its unconventional delivery, yet the elegant simplicity of the card lingered in his thoughts. Maria Petrova, once a rising star in data ethics, whose career benefited from Elara's fall, clutched her invitation, a tremor running through her. The words resonated with a strange, almost hypnotic power. Past insights are invaluable. What insights could a ghost possibly want? She remembered the specific, scathing articles she'd written, the ones that had sealed Elara's reputation as a reckless renegade. A shiver went down her spine. The very act of this invitation was a declaration. A move from the shadows into a blinding spotlight, and everyone knew that meant unparalleled risk or unimaginable reward. The date approached a ticking clock for each recipient. The lack of a disclosed location fueled endless speculation, frantic communications between the recipients. Though no one openly admitted to accepting the mysterious summons, Vance, ever the pragmatist, initiated a full-scale analysis of the invitation itself, hunting for hidden trackers, digital fingerprints, anything that could give him an edge. He found nothing, only the lingering scent of an impossible, almost magical precision in its creation. This absence of digital breadcrumbs was itself a chilling revelation. It meant the sender was not only powerful, but also incredibly disciplined, a master of analog concealment. It was as if she had anticipated his every countermove. Elara, watching from her command center, a space far removed from any conventional grid, allowed herself a small, knowing smile. Their paranoia was palpable, their every encrypted message intercepted, every hesitant phone call monitored. The meeting point specified on the invitation, a desolate, abandoned airstrip far from any major city, was a mere theatrical flourish, a stage for the first act. The real destination remained her ultimate secret, a carefully constructed labyrinth designed to test their resolve, their courage, and ultimately, their very sense of reality. Vance, despite his misgivings, knew he had to go. The ghost of Elara, the phantom that had haunted his professional life, had finally extended an offer too compelling to refuse. It was a chance to confront the disruption, to understand the source of the chaos, and perhaps to finally put an end to the game. He felt a strange pull, a professional obligation mixed with a desperate, personal curiosity. He saw an old image flash in his mind. Elara, standing defiant, her eyes burning with an intensity he'd once dismissed as youthful arrogance, but now recognized as something far more formidable. He remembered a coded message she'd sent him years ago, a warning he'd foolishly ignored. The memory stung. The potential for a trap was immense, the risk to his career, his reputation, catastrophic. Yet, the possibility of an answer, of finally unmasking the anomaly, outweighed everything. The invitation was a declaration of war, a calculated move in a game only Elara truly understood. And the ultimate prize, the tantalizing secret of the true location, awaited those brave or foolish enough to follow her lead. The sleek, autonomous vehicles, symbols of a wealth Vance himself rarely encountered, glided silently up the winding driveway. Each carried a luminary, a titan of industry, or a vocal critic, all united by Elara's audacious invitation. Vance, seated beside the formidable Anya Sharma, felt the familiar knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. The digital map on his console had shown this estate as a blank space, an intentional void in the world's most detailed cartography, a detail that only deepened his sense of unease. The mansion loomed not just large, but impossibly vast, a modernist fortress of glass and steel rising from a meticulously sculpted landscape, defying architectural conventions and hinting at a power beyond comprehension. As the cars halted, silent valets, moving with uncanny precision, materialized from the shadows of a towering, illuminated water feature. The air thrummed with a low, almost imperceptible frequency, a subtle vibration that seemed to penetrate the very bones. Vance stepped out, the cool evening air carrying the scent of exotic blossoms he couldn't name. The other guests, a collection of skeptical faces and wary eyes, emerged from their own vehicles. Their collective murmurs a low hum of disbelief. Professor Albright, notorious for his public dismissals of Alara's radical theories, adjusted his spectacles, his jaw slightly agape. What kind of mind could orchestrate such an arrival, such an opulent, almost intimidating display? A single, impossibly wide door, forged from a dark, unknown metal, slowly hissed open, revealing only a breathtaking expanse of light within, a promise of revelation. They stepped into an antechamber that stretched into the distance, a corridor of polished obsidian walls reflecting a ceiling made entirely of living bioluminescent moss. The sheer audacity of it all was overwhelming. No art hung on these walls. The architecture itself was the masterpiece, cold and perfect, yet pulsating with a strange, organic warmth. Vance felt a familiar prickle of recognition, a design philosophy he'd only ever seen hinted at in Alara's earliest, discarded prototypes. A soft, melodic chime echoed, and a voice calm and synthetic invited them forward. "Welcome, esteemed guests, to the convergence point." The voice was unplaceable, devoid of any human intonation, yet it carried an undeniable authority, making their collective unease deepen into a palpable tension, suggesting that this was merely the prelude to something far more profound. They walked through a series of increasingly elaborate halls, each segment a sensory experience designed to disorient and impress. One room pulsed with shifting light patterns, another resonated with a symphony of natural sounds, creating an environment that was both beautiful and subtly unsettling. The group, usually so opinionated and boisterous, had fallen silent, their bravado stripped away by the sheer spectacle. Vance noticed subtle, almost imperceptible design elements, mathematical symmetries, and organic flow patterns that mirrored the complex, self-generating algorithms. Alara had once championed algorithms he had, with typical short-sightedness, dismissed as unworkable. A sense of dawning realization began to creep into his mind, an insidious whisper of who might be behind such an elaborate, personal statement. The true game, he felt, was just beginning, and they were all pawns. Finally, they arrived at a cavernous chamber, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. A single, raised platform dominated the center, unoccupied. The detractors instinctively clustered together, a fragile alliance formed by shared trepidation. Anya Sharma, usually so composed, unconsciously clutched her elegant handbag. Professor Albright adjusted his glasses again, his eyes darting around, searching for an explanation, for a crack in the perfect facade. The silence in the room was absolute, so profound it pressed against their eardrums, magnifying every hesitant breath. It was the silence before a storm, before a grand reveal, a silence pregnant with the weight of expectation and a growing dread that something monumental was about to shift the very ground beneath their feet. Then, from the depths of the chamber, a low, resonant tone began to hum, vibrating through the floor and up their legs. The air shimmered, and a holographic projection flickered to life on the platform, showing abstract, geometric shapes morphing and reforming with breathtaking speed. It was art, yet it was also a message, a coded language only a select few might understand. Vance, his heart pounding, recognized the visual syntax, the disruption patterns Alara had once described as the very fabric of emergent consciousness. He remembered the coded message, the warning he'd foolishly ignored. The memory stung with renewed ferocity. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken accusations and anticipated vindication, as the room itself seemed to hold its breath. The projections faded, and a figure began to ascend from beneath the platform, bathed in a spotlight. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered elite. It couldn't be, not her. Not the eccentric, unrealistic visionary they had collectively, and often publicly, dismissed. But there she was! Her posture was erect, confident. Her eyes, once described by Vance as burning with youthful arrogance, now held a serene, almost predatory calm. She wore a simple, elegant gown that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, a stark contrast to the power suits and tailored dresses of her stunned guests. This was not the broken entrepreneur they had imagined, but a queen on her throne. The silence that followed her full appearance was absolute. thicker than before, a suffocating blanket woven from disbelief and sudden, crushing humility. Vance felt a cold dread spread through him. The ghost of Alada, the phantom that had haunted his professional life, was no longer a ghost. She was flesh and blood, undeniably real, and undeniably triumphant. Anya Sharma's face, usually a mask of shrewd calculation, was slack with shock. Professor Albright's jaw hung open, his neatly combed hair seeming to bristle with static disbelief. The carefully constructed worldviews of these powerful individuals, built on their own perceived superiority and Alara's alleged failings, shattered around them like fragile glass. Their contempt, their scorn, now tasted like bitter ashes in their mouths. Alara surveyed them, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. A smile devoid of malice, yet radiating an undeniable sense of vindication. She didn't need to speak. Her presence, the sheer scale of her success embodied by the magnificent mansion they stood in, was speech enough. The air crackled with unasked questions, with accusations that dared not form, with apologies that would never be uttered. They were stunned, speechless, their carefully cultivated authority crumbling into dust. They, who had judged her, ridiculed her, now stood exposed not just to her, but to each other, as blind, arrogant fools. The anomaly wasn't just unmasked. It had swallowed them whole, revealing their own profound Vance met her gaze across the vast expanse. Her eyes, he realized, still burned with that same intensity, but now it was tempered by a quiet power, a certainty that had been forged in the fires of their doubt. He remembered her coded message, a warning he'd foolishly ignored it, a game he thought he understood. He knew now he hadn't even grasped the rules. The ultimate prize, the tantalizing secret of the true location, was not just this mansion, but the revelation of their own hubris. The game was far from over, but the first move, the most devastating one, had been played, leaving them adrift in a sea of their own stunned, silent defeat. They had underestimated her, and now they were left to grapple with the seismic shift in their reality. The cacophony of their internal turmoil was deafening in its silence. Vance, his face a canvas of dawning dread, watched as she turned, a faint, almost imperceptible smile gracing her lips, not of triumph, but of profound peace. She had not needed to declare her victory. It resonated in the air, a truth too powerful for words. The mansion, once a stage 4, their elaborate deception, now felt like a mausoleum for their pride. Her journey, forged in isolation and tempered by their scorn, had culminated not in a roar, but in this quiet, undeniable affirmation of self. She walked away, leaving behind the shattered fragments of their certainties, a testament to a strength that had no need for sound. Her transformation was complete, a silent revolution that had reshaped not just her world, but theirs. They were left to wrestle with the uncomfortable knowledge that the loudest truths are often those that speak without a single syllable. For the ultimate reward was not the prize they sought, but the irrefutable proof of her indomitable spirit, whispering its victory across the profound expanse of their bewildered defeat. And in that profound quietude, the universe itself seemed to nod in knowing affirmation. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more narratives that explore the depths of human spirit.